What's up, YouTube? It's Joe Catrapalia sitting on the couch making some money investing in fractional real estate online, as usual. Today I'm going to show you a tool that I don't think I've used on the channel before and give you a couple of tips on how to use it. So yesterday I did a video about this short-term rental in it's 29 Palms, California, but it's right by the Joshua Tree National Park. I talked a lot about you can see that video and see all the due diligence that I did on it. Um, but I definitely missed something that's probably on a lot of people's minds is, well, it's in Southern California. Is it at risk of fire, right? Is it um, what sort of natural disaster risk is there? And somebody actually, made that comment on the channel. My initial thought was, well, this is the desert, right? So I thought, I think it's probably not that high a risk, but I didn't know. And it reminded me of a tool that I've used before, but definitely don't use enough. And it is the FEMA National Risk Index. I think this is if you are looking at a new market and you're worried about, you know, what types of risks there are there and their frequency. This is a helpful tool. It's a good place to start. It is definitely sometimes difficult to parse the data, and so I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the things that you have to know to understand how this site works. So first of all, if you just look at this risk index, which is the main map that shows up when you go, and this is the website, right? hazards.fema.gov/NRI/MAD hashtag, right? You just got to bookmark it. I mean, it's not one that you're going to remember, or I think if you Google this name, you'll end up finding it. Kind of like how I usually do with the FEMA flood map. Um, so what's there to know about this? One of the big things is you see this. This is if you come to this main one, this is just the risk index. And so what this is it's taking your expected annual loss, multiplying it by what they call the social vulnerability, and then do they add or do they divide by the they divide by the community resilience, right? And so these two have more to do with how is the population in that area, um, what's their ability like to cope with disaster, more so than the frequency or type of disaster itself. But even the expected annual loss, and this is the one that I like to look at the most, you can see uh, increases with density, right? So, like if you look at major cities in Texas, the expected annual loss is higher there, but it's because there's more structures, there's more people, there's more vehicles that can be impacted. I don't know why I just zoomed in on that, but that can be impacted by the losses. And so I'm gonna use my market as an example, San Antonio. This is why you really have to. You can't just look at the color and say, okay, I'm just going to only invest in the light spots and I'm going to avoid all the dark spots, because one, that would keep you out of a lot of major markets. But it's not completely accurate because what it's showing is there's more risk of loss because there's more to lose in those areas, right? It's not as if as soon as you leave Bexar County, which is where San Antonio is, that there's lower risks of natural disasters happening. It's that they may still happen, but um, it's going to damage less property. And so what you actually have to do if you want to understand your different risks is to dig into look into this information on the side, um, and you can and it breaks down the different things. So like the risk of a cold wave, right? Like this one I think is hilarious because I grew up in Maine and I live living down here. um, we have it gets below freezing maybe a couple nights every year. There was several, 3 or 4 years ago now, I think, maybe even five. We had like 3 days of freezing temperatures, and that just shut down our whole city because that never happens. So that was a serious, but that was like a once in 100 year event, with like the longest cold streak that we had had, I think actually on record. Um, but and so that did have a real impact. But other than that, you have very minor things, things like pipes breaking and whatnot. So you can see, okay, it'll tell you what's the risk. We've got a cold wave, and then the frequency of that event, right? And it's zero point 0.1 events per year, so it's really only happening like once every 10 years, right? And so historic loss ratio very low. But the expected annual loss is pretty high because there's a lot of exposure, right? There's 24 trillion. That doesn't seem right. I guess so though, but I don't know. But there's a high, there's a lot that could be damaged by it. So that's uh, but for me, what I really care about is like, what are the chances of this happening, right? What are the frequency of the event? I think that's the thing that, from a common sense, like, how is my property going to do? The most useful information. Now, obviously, I'm not some expert in natural disasters or anything. This is just a tool I'm using when I'm doing due diligence to try to get an idea of what my risks are in a certain market. It's especially good in markets that I've never been in before, so I definitely should have pulled it up when I was looking at the Joshua Tree one. Um, I've been trying to keep my due diligence videos to be not so long, and so I end up, um, doing a little bit brief ones, especially if I'm ruling out a property. I don't necessarily go through everything, and so I don't know. It actually, when I saw the comment, it really struck me that I can't believe I didn't pull it up, because I know it's a market. I know Southern California has a lot of different types of risks, and we'll look at that one in a minute. But I just want to show you a couple others. So, like, you can see San Antonio is it's pretty dark, right? It shows up as, um, I think it is. Oh, okay. Man, this is it's pretty sensitive. So let's click Bear County again. I think that is showing up as relatively high, right? Yeah, relatively high. But when we really dig into it, okay, you got that a little bit high of a cold wave, um drought. This is 54.5 events per year. I don't really know how they count an event in that, but we do have, long droughts here. Earthquakes, 0.005% chance per year. So, like, virtually no risk, but I mean, there's always some chance. But if you look, this is where I think almost all of it comes from, is our hail. Like, we have hail every year. It says 3 events per year. If you don't park under a carport or in a garage, your car's just going to get you're going to get hail damage on your car, and it's going to be pretty significant, because we get big hail here. And I've seen it actually break windows. I really am terrified to have skylights here, because we have serious hail damage. And so I would say, if I had to, this is what in my mind is the biggest risk for an investment property in this market. But it's something you just have to look at everyone. So this one, you hear about, after every hailstorm, people get new roofs, and I think that that's a big part of why there's, this is the such a large expected annual loss because of it. Yeah, we do have a heat wave. It's funny that it says only, zero point 0.2 events per year. It feels like we have one every summer, but apparently it's got to get hotter than I think for that to count. Um, Hurricane frequency, 0 events per year. It's so strange to me that we have this, 84.3 score. We're just too far inland. Like, if we do get hit by a hurricane, it's really, we're getting the very edges of it. We're not really getting any serious storm here. Ice storms, I think this falls in, kind of in line with hail, although they obviously define it differently, and we have it less often. Um, Landslides, 0 a year, right? Lightning, okay, lots of lightning happens here. Well, that's, not too surprising. Riverine flooding, yes, we're the river city, right? We've got rivers going straight through downtown. Whenever it rains, we definitely have flooding. Um, I actually feel like we manage it very well. We have, this is why I always check flood, and I think this because I'm always avoiding floodplains, right? But we have a lot of parks within the city that are all in the floodplains. We have, we've done a decent job at stormwater management, but obviously, there's a decent amount of damage that still happens from it. Strong wind, one event per year, that's very low, right? It's tornadoes. This one actually really surprises me. You know, point 0.4 events per year. Um, I've lived here since 2018. I think I remember hearing about a tornado in our county once. Obviously, they've happened a little bit more than that, but it's not. We are not in Tornado Alley here. I was surprised this shows up as so high, but this is relative to everywhere else, and so some places just don't have any. Wildfire, you know, again, very low percent chance. But so when you see, okay, this is dark, it looks like we have a relatively high expected annual loss. It's not until you really dig into those numbers that you realize, like, well, okay, I'm not at all worried. Like, one of the reasons I picked San Antonio when I moved here is because of the market. I looked at a lot of different stuff, as far as investing in real estate here, because that's how I made a living, is selling investment properties and investing in property. And I intentionally avoided hurricane markets, and places where because that's I've lived and worked in Houston before. I spent a lot of time in Louisiana, Mississippi, places where you just get hit by hurricanes all the time, and I know that it's just not something I don't want to deal with investment properties in those markets. But let's take a look now at we were looking at San Bernardino County the other yesterday when we were looking at that property. And so, oh, where is it? Oh yeah, close that up. Yes, this is right. And so let's see. I want to just look at the same thing and get an idea, right? And I was pretty surprised when I looked at this. Now you have to realize it's a very big county, so it doesn't necessarily apply to your area. I think this is a good tool to use to get a general idea about the area that you're looking at. And some stuff will definitely apply to the whole county, and then some stuff is going to be more or less depending on your actual physical location. So drought, okay, more events per year than we had, by a decent amount, but then relatively low. So that seems a little strange to me, when you compare to our San Antonio. Earthquake relatively high. But that's kind of interesting, right? It's only still 0.5% chance per year, but I guess relative to the rest of the world, that's pretty high. And I mean, it is. I think this is 100 times more likely than it was, when we looked at San Antonio. Hail, almost, very, very low relative to ours. Um, Heat wave, 9.5 events per year. Well, makes a lot of sense. It's the desert, right? Um, Landslides. There were mountains to the south of it, so it's funny. It shows relatively high score or high chance, but then it says 0 events per year. So some of this stuff doesn't make a ton of sense. You can always click into the see more details and learn about it. They get less lightning than us, and I'm just trying to compare, because that's how it works for me. Like it's a lot easier to compare markets when you're doing relative risk and relative value and everything than it is to just look at it in a vacuum if I just don't know what this data really means, right? And so it's not as if I'm saying, oh, San Antonio is better or San Bernardino County is better. But it helps me sort of put it in perspective, like, okay, what's the relative risk from one to the other? Flooding, this actually struck me as surprising. It's higher, more flooding events per year than Bear County. But when we looked at the maps, there were some flood zones right nearby. There are mountains, and so I think it makes some sense why that happens. It just wasn't going to be the first thing that I was worried about. Um, Strong winds, pretty low. Tornadoes, 2.8 events per year. So significantly more tornadoes than we have. But so it doesn't always, the risks don't always match up their score. And so it's something like, okay, that's something, if I'm worried about it, I want to dig into the details. Wildfires, okay, very high, right? Like almost a 1% chance per year. Um, that's a pretty high number relative to, where we see like, very close to zero in some other spots. I actually don't remember what was the wildfire score on, can we back out there? How annoying is this to go back and forth between these two? Let's see. Landslide, river rain, flooding, lightning, strong winds, tornado, wildfire. 0.05% chance. Okay, and now let's go back out over there. And so we're at 0.05 compared to 0.9. So what is 97? So that's almost 20 times more likely to have a wildfire here, right? And so again, in the county, and so maybe it doesn't apply so much to the individual property. Although you can dig into here and get a lot more info. One of the counties, or one of the commenter who had pointed this out to me on yesterday's video, um, had pasted something in there about how even in desert areas, wildfires are becoming more common because we bring in like non-local grasses, and I know non-indigenous grasses. I don't know what it is, something like that. And so it's that grass is spread out, and even though and so it makes the fires more likely to spread than they would have before when it was actually just pure desert. Um, I don't know, when you dig into here, I don't know exactly how helpful this data is, because again, it's just like monetizing it. And so, although these frequency values, I think, are kind of interesting, and they'll tell you like what time period they looked at and everything. That's all I really wanted to do today, though, is just go over this tool. It is something that I ignored. I really, it should have been top of mind, right? I mean, we know what's going on over in California today with where there's fires, and I mean, we just recently had floods and storms all over the country. It's certainly, if I'm looking to invest in fractional real estate, and I'm looking at a new market, and uh it's one I've never been in before. I want to know what the risks are, what I'm worried about. And so this is a tool. I'll probably add it to my list that I look at every single time. At least when I'm checking out a market that I haven't looked at before, which Joshua Tree area was, it's new for me. I mean, I knew a little bit about it, but not enough. Definitely should have looked at this. So that's, I think one of the things we should always strive for is doing better and better due diligence all the time. Like, I mean, I've been in this business for 20 years, and I still learn about new tools, new ways to figure things out. The amount of information we have on our fingertips today is just completely unbelievable relative to when I got started. And so it's what makes it possible for us to invest in markets across the country with a lot more confidence than I would have been able to do when I first started in the business. That's really everything for today. Please like and subscribe. I always forget to ask you to do that. And I do have links in the description to all the sites that I'm currently investing on. Um, I love getting some comments. I had a couple of good ones in the last few days. Please keep those coming. If there's other topics you want me to talk about, I saw somebody asked about Fundrise, and that's one I haven't looked at in a while. I'm pretty sure it's really just a REIT platform, but I'm going to take another look, and I'll share some info on that if I come up with anything that's interesting or useful. But yeah, please keep them coming, and that's about it. So until next time, I'm going to keep making mistakes so that you don't have to.